I wanted to make a video now about the Waco uh, incident, the Branch Davidian incident. It's a few days past the anniversary of that, and I think it's a really important event. And for me personally, it was maybe the single most, the single biggest catalyst in my um, political thinking. You know, prior when I was a little kid. Um, I, although I didn't know the term, I probably would have been a socialist because, I mean, not, I didn't know any Marx or anything, but I say that because if you had asked me, if you had proposed a problem to me, a societal problem, if you had said, you know, what should we do about pollution or poverty or education or whatever, I just would have said, well, the government should take care of that problem. Um, and I even probably would have thought of myself as being really kind of smart for always saying the same solution for everything. And implied in all that was the idea that the state is a panacea and that it's benign. And when Waco happened, I was 10, and I do remember it, but I didn't really think about it. But maybe, I'd say within a year or two after that, I saw a documentary about it. I don't think it was the most famous one. There are several made right after it. In any event, the documentary raised some really troubling questions. And long story short, the best that can be said is that the government was guilty of negligent mass homicide. That's the best that can be said. Now, that's what originally got me to realize that maybe the state's not necessarily benign. Maybe, you know, originally I would have thought, well, okay, so the state can do good, but obviously it can also do bad, so we have to do a little cost-benefit analysis here and weigh the options. Of course, that just years later, you know, got me to where I am. But anyway, that's not what the point of this video. The point of this video is to go over Waco a little bit. Now, in my experience, people who have never really researched it beyond what they remember hearing on TV or see referenced in the media still have a gross misunderstanding of the event. They mischaracterize it. They don't really know what happened, and as a result, they tend to be at least sympathetic to the government and have a certain, it's kind of really bad, but they treat the Branch Davidians like they got what they deserved, which of course is absurd. You know, a lot of people will allege that Koresh was raping children or whatever. It's not true in the sense that they mean it, but even if it was, just assume that that's true. When you have a rapist who's raping children, the solution is not to go and kill all the children, which is what the government did. And at the very least, on accident. I would think, although I don't think it can be proven, that they actually did it on purpose. Now, I mean, I guess I can't comprehensively go over the whole thing, but basically what happened was the ATF, Federal Regulatory Agency, was getting in a lot of heat because of what happened at Ruby Ridge, and they had some scandals with sexual harassment, and some people in Congress had kind of mentioned that maybe they would abolish the ATF. Now, of course, this is a joke. Federal agencies don't get abolished, especially ones that can have the veneer of law enforcement, which is a joke in this case. But now, the ATF has a long history of dealing with this kind of thing by generating publicity for itself. They do this even today. I mean, if you look at the news today, there's something called the gun runner scandal, where it's turned out that the ATF was deliberately running guns from the United States to Mexico. I mean, deliberately running guns from the United States to Mexico so that they could then claim that there's a big problem and that the ATF needs to regulate more and needs more power. And they also wanted to wait until these guns accumulated in one place and then do a big sting, and that would be all in the paper. This is what they always do. And this is what happened in Waco. They had started an investigation of the Branch Davidians, who were peaceful members of a small sect. Branch Davidians are an offshoot of the Church of Seventh-day Adventists, and I think that they picked them because they are a small population, and they are, you know, like a minority, and they figured, now this will be good press. We'll go in there. There'll be a couple news stories about us getting all these guns from these scary people. And if it turns out in the end that they didn't do anything wrong, if they're acquitted in court, that will be months later. It'll be the back page of the news. It won't be news. And in the meantime, we will have gotten all this positive press. And if it had been a real investigation, I mean, they'd been investigating for a year. The Davidians were aware of this. David Koresh had invited federal investigators over, said, hey, they can come, they can see whatever they want. Everything's on the up and up. And they didn't want to do that. They didn't want to do a real investigation. They wanted to have a big raid, and that's what they had. Now they picked the wrong people to raid, basically. They, as far as we can tell, just showed up with a whole bunch of people and started shooting. My guess is that they didn't just start shooting the Davidians. My guess is that they just started shooting the Davidians' dogs. The Davidians had a whole bunch of dogs. 70 guys pull up in cattle trailers dressed in black ski masks. The dogs started to attack them. Of course, these people work for the government. They don't feel like there's any reason for them to have even the least bit restraint. They started killing the dogs. Not surprising either. I would guess at that point the other ATF officers, probably hearing the gunshots that were ATF officers shooting dogs, assumed that a firefight broke out, which probably a lot of them wanted to happen because they're roided up freaks, and a gunfight happened. And from this point on, the character of what happened after that changed. It wasn't a publicity stunt. It started that way and it had gone bad. From this point on, it was the government attempt to cover up the fact that it had basically attacked these people, demonized them in the media, and of course the media bought it, and most American people bought it, and most American people still buy it. They still basically imagine that this was a cult. Okay, I guess, but you know, the definition of an occult is broad enough to include any sect, so I don't think it's a valid term, you know, at least in a derogatory sense, like that they were raping kids. Again, I think that Koresh probably was guilty of statutory rape. I'm not inclined to consider that super evil necessarily. Certainly a little weird. There again, you don't kill the victim there. And I don't know. So they had a siege for I don't know, lasted from April or February 23rd till April 19th, and it appears that the evidence that the government had committed wrongdoing on that first day. They had attacked the place, including with helicopters, by the way, which you can actually see in the video, which is way illegal for whatever that's worth. Decided that the Davidians need to go, and that their building needs to go because their building was the evidence against them. And so they burned it down, and they attempted to kill every single Davidian. There's actually, and people have a hard time believing this, there's actually video of it. The FBI had a surveillance drone taking infrared video of the entire event when it burned down. There's a documentary about this called the FLIR Project, and I know people say, oh, it's just some documentary. Okay, well, the guy in the documentary is the guy who invented the drone and the camera on the drone. Right, so he is the single greatest authority that there possibly could be on this. And he says point blank that the FBI, or whoever the government agents are machine gunning all the people who are running out of the building that's burning. And the only Davidians who survived were people who came out of the front of the building where there were media cameras, 3 miles away but with telescopic lenses. And so they were not butchered. So it's a really disconcerting event. I'd recommend the documentary Waco, The Rules of Engagement is a really good place to start. There's also a number of really good books about it. The one I read is called The Davidian Massacre by Carol Moore. That's a pretty good book. That just details all, goes through everything. What was on the warrant? What was the reason that the ATF was out there? Goes to everyone who died, when they died. And basically, when I learned all this, I became extremely outraged, not just at the crime, but the fact that the criminals, in this case the federal government, not only went unpunished, but have acted like the heroes. They're the victims also. I mean, they felt... And the whole event illustrates so many things. If you look, there are congressional hearings on them, and then Congressman Chuck Schumer was one of the... I don't think he was the chairman, but he was there, and he basically says explicitly in the hearing that there's a double standard, and the double standard is that government employees did nothing wrong, and nothing can be brought against them. That nothing is to be considered. He basically says that there is no evidence that he will ever accept that they did anything wrong, no matter what. I mean, it's just like it's axiomatic to him that obviously government officials don't do anything wrong and can't do anything wrong. Hence, the investigation is pointless. Now, there was one congressman, Bob Barr, who most recently ran as the Libertarian president in 2008, and although he's no Ron Paul, I do have respect for him because he was the only one at the hearing who basically said, well, just because they have badges doesn't mean that they have a mandate from heaven, which is basically the way Schumer thought of it and the way most people in government tend to think of it. But anyway, I know this isn't comprehensive in the least. There's no way I could do that in such a short video, but people are unfamiliar with the event. I highly recommend that they look into it. It was a watershed event in the police state, in the militarization of the police in the United States. It set many precedents, and it demonstrates, I think, the worst case scenario. I mean, the federal government murdered people on national television, innocent people in Texas, Americans, and it just did it with total impunity. And that did a lot to wake me up, and I think the more people who look at it, others will do the same. So